Jump on live. Here we go. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. We have had over 400 women grace this stage. I want to welcome everyone who is jumping on live right now. Thank you so much for being here. If you could do us a huge favor and share this video wherever you are watching us at, so we can get more eyes and more ears on our content and the awesome guests we have today. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I'm speaking with an amazing woman named Catharine Hay. Catharine is a women's empowerment boundaries coach and the owner of Empowered to Be Your Best. She really loves helping up-level others through their confidence and their self-esteem. She is passionate about supporting and empowering women to become their very best versions of themselves, someone who is self-assured, values their own worth, and maintains self-respect. Yes, Catharine specializes in helping women set boundaries so they can experience freedom in both their personal and professional lives. Yes, her methodology is based upon her lifelong experience setting boundaries in critical situations. She shows women how they can say a self-affirming yes to what matters most and an indisputable no to those that don't. Welcome, Catharine.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I am so happy to have you here and hanging out with us today. Can you do us a huge favor and kind of introduce yourself? Where are you from?
Okay. Well, as Sabrina said, my name is Catharine Hay. And I am actually located now in Washington State, near Seattle. And although I've lived around the United States, I came from California 2.5 years ago. So, let's see. On a personal note, I'm actually I have 2 grown sons, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great grandson. So yeah, it's really awesome. And I'm really, like, nowadays, I'm really a lot about, my business, because, you have family and, kids and everything, and then they grow up, and then you're like, okay, so you have this freedom now, right? But I've always been passionate, actually, about being an entrepreneur. And when I got the opportunity, I said, I'm going to go for it. And it's scary, but it's also rewarding.
That's fantastic. Well, I so appreciate you hanging out with us and being willing to share some of your journey, share some of your story, and then tell us what you're doing now. I know that you're doing a ton of stuff now in the world of confidence and empowering women. So I'm super excited to talk about that. But this podcast is all about storytelling. We love to hear stories, inspirational stories, big or small. Of our guest speakers. So I would love for you to share any story that resonates with you, where you did a pivot, you did a change, where you had some struggle in your world and you were able to come out of that.
Well, okay, going back a few decades to when I was really young, my kids were little, and 2 and 6. And I was in a really abusive relationship. It was mentally, physically, and emotionally abusive. And it got to the point where I realized that I needed to leave. I think the biggest thing for me was I didn't want my children to be around that and grow up like that, and, to be like their father. And so I started planning about how I was going to leave, and I had to do it, like look for an apartment and all that kind of stuff when he wasn't there, obviously. And so I did. I took care of all of that, and then one day when he was at work, I just took the kids and everything and disappeared. And actually, he knew where I was working, but because I was still in the same town, city, it was big enough, and but he didn't know where we lived, and I didn't tell him for about a year because I was afraid. And so that was a big turning point for me, because I had been even when I was younger, like 19, I had been in an abusive relationship then. But it wasn't as bad as this one. It's like I went from the frying pan into the fire. And so, yeah. So I started doing some soul searching and saying, asking myself, why did I end up in these relationships? And I think my biggest epiphany was that if I felt good about myself and who I was, I would never be with someone who treated me like that, And and then, of course, for it to happen 2 times. And I decided that I really needed to obviously start working on myself because I didn't want to ever be in that situation again. And I never was. And so that's why I say, talk about setting boundaries in critical situations, because that's probably one of the most critical situations you could find yourself in terms of, that kind of thing. And it is, it's very scary, and it takes a lot of courage. And we all know that courage is not not being afraid. That's just stupid, but doing it anyway. And I just really knew that I had to leave because, as anyone who's been abused knows, that your abuser usually escalates. They don't go in the opposite direction. They don't just stop. So it just gets worse. And that's pretty much what happened one night. Actually, he had come home. He was really angry at me about something stupid. And then he went upstairs, and I could hear him rooting around in the closet. And he had told me he had a gun. I'd never seen it, but I was, oh my God. So, and he had locked me in the house. The front door was locked. I couldn't get out. I had to run onto the patio, do the combo and unlock it. And I'm holding my 2-year-old. And I'm trying, it's dark, and I'm trying to get out. And I finally got it off just as he came downstairs. But you can imagine I was really terrified. And luckily I was able to run over to the neighbors, and she called the police. So,
wow.
So that's my story. And over the years, I've met, people who have been in that situation and maybe even worse. But, and the sad thing is that a lot of times women feel ashamed or embarrassed, like we did something wrong, or, and that is not the case at all. You do not deserve that. You didn't do anything wrong. And it doesn't matter what they tell you, that, it's your fault because you broke the yolk on the eggs or whatever the heck it is. So, there's a lot of issues that you have to work through to get to the point where you are, you're not just surviving, but you're thriving, and recognize who you really are and become the confident person that you were meant to be.
Fantastic. When did you, thank you for sharing, by the way.
You're welcome.
So appreciate that and can so relate to the narcissistic abuse, a very similar story. But I love to ask this question. When did you realize that you were a codependent or an empath or in a narcissistic relationship? Did you find out during or after?
Yeah, since this was so long ago, this was like back in 1982, and there wasn't a lot of talk back then about being codependent. So I later on found out what that was, and and that when you're codependent, you're an enabler, and he was an alcoholic and a drug addict. So obviously, I was enabling him by remaining there. So, so when I realized, when I learned about that, then I realized what, my part in it was. Not that, again, I did anything wrong, but I had to think about, the first time he hit me, why didn't I leave? I'd been abused before, I should have known better, right? So, but getting down on yourself and beating yourself up does absolutely nothing. You just have to move forward and recognize, what caused you maybe to be in that relationship without blaming, without the guilt.
Absolutely, definitely. So when you decided to leave, what were the things you did? I know, you said it was kind of on the down low, but did you have to, what were like the couple of steps that you took to go from in the house living to completely out on your own?
I was really lucky to have my mom to help me out. And so, she helped me plan, like, because I needed help to move that day. So, it wasn't like a regular move where, you're working together and moving. I had to escape. So she helped me with that. And she helped me out, with money for the deposit for the, place I rented. And what I had to do was I had to go behind his back, and I would take the kids with me. And the 2-year-old didn't know what was going on, but of course the 6-year-old was a little more aware. And so we were going to look at apartments, and one day he said something, and because he didn't know, he was only 6.
Yeah.
All I can say is, luckily, I don't know that his dad didn't catch on or he didn't hear him. But then I said, I really need to escalate this, make this happen sooner. So, that, and then of course I had to plan what day, what was the best day, of course, and when he was at work. And actually, luckily, we lived in the suburbs, but he worked in San Francisco. So that was a bit of a commute. So I had a good, maybe 8-10 hours, to do that. But it just still was really, really difficult. And of course your kids are, the baby, he was 2 at the time. He didn't know, but my oldest one, he's wondering what's going on, right? And it's very scary for them because they're in this whole new place, and your dad's not there, and what's happening, they don't understand.
Yeah. So many times women stay stuck and don't put up boundaries because they're scared, because they're fearful. What was some of the fear that you had to kind of subside and like push down in order to really take action into leaving?
Well, of course, my biggest fear was that that I would be severe. I mean, I'd already been, abused, and had big bruises and actually busted eardrum at one time. But you know, I thought, oh my God, what if he tries to kill me? Right? You know, doesn't want me to leave. So I guess it just came to the point where my wanting to leave and get out of that was more important to me than the fear. I just realized I had, you know, I had to act on that. So as much as you can push that down, that's, you know, that's what I did. But, you know, again, and you don't know how you're going to react when that day actually comes that you're planning to leave, because that's the biggest scary, right? You know, like what if he comes home early or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that, what was it? Some of you who are younger might not remember this, but there was a movie with Farrah Fawcett called The Burning Bed. And it was about, you know, a woman who had, you know, been abused. And that movie really stuck with me.
Did her husband come home early?
No, it wasn't her. Actually, I think he, I don't know remember if he set the house on fire or it was really bad. I'm sorry, I don't remember the details because it was like 40 something years ago. But it was, and you didn't see movies like that a lot back then, you know, they didn't have Lifetime TV back then.
Yes. Oh, this reminds me of another movie that I saw, not quite that old, of a man who was, I think he was abusing his wife, and then his wife poisoned him with a poison that slowed his heart rate down to the point of like he would register as being dead, and they buried him alive. And then he dug himself out because he wasn't dead. So he dug himself out of this hole somehow. I think it might even be called Buried Alive. And he came back, and then he started to like bury his wife inside the house. So like he would board off doors and stuff to get her into like the basement, and then started putting up walls to like get and like squished her down. I
Oh
forgot
my,
about that. I should look that
I,
movie up.
yeah, I would like to know the name of that. Well, that of course is on the extreme end. And, you know, but I actually don't recognize, you know, that movie. The thing, the interesting thing about men who are abusive, they're actually cowards, because if they're, you know, confronted by, like, say, another man or something, you know, they're not really brave. But, well, one of the things that makes it difficult is that typically an abuser isolates the woman from her friends and family.
Yep.
So she feels like she has no one to depend on, you know, and that makes it scary. And sometimes if the woman isn't working, I was lucky I was working, so they feel like they have nothing. And the abuser has done a real number on their head, made them feel like they were less than nothing, and that they deserve to be, you know, to be treated that way. And so, yeah, the most difficult thing is the isolation. But I guess I mean, I don't remember my ex trying to really isolate me so much, because I wasn't, and luckily I was working, but that is not an uncommon situation for that to happen.
Yeah. And I love how you're saying that a lot of times not a lot of times, but all the time, these abusers have really low self-esteem.
Yeah.
They're not really all big and bad. And they pick on people that are weaker than them mentally, emotionally, financially, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one thing that I realized after I left was that like the verbal and emotional abuse was worse. And because I would have nightmares about it. not so much about being hit, but about being trapped in the corner, having him scream at me. And then you're like, well, go ahead and hit me because the tension is terrible, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is the kind of, it took me a while. And I also remember that if anyone moved their arm, like near me, like say you swung your arm or what, I would jump. Yeah, it took, I mean, after a couple of years, I stopped doing that. But, and people didn't talk about PTSD back then. And I didn't, realize at the time that's what I had because I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. And it does take a while to takes a couple years for it to kind of subside.
Yeah.
How are your children?
Well, that it's interesting because I'm actually going to write an article about dealing with setting boundaries with grown children. I learned a lot about codependence because unfortunately my youngest son is an alcoholic and a drug addict. And so I was codependent for a long time because when it's your child, you worry about them. And so it took me a while I had to completely cut him out of my life. And which is, really difficult. And honestly, I miss him sometimes, but I can't let myself go there, because I can't, the only person who can help him is himself. That's the only person who can make that decision. And you don't realize that, right away. And you think, oh, if I do this or that or whatever, it'll change. But it does. Yeah, but it doesn't.
Definitely. What's the number one lesson that you've learned about life?
The number one lesson I've learned about life is that, that we're constantly evolving and developing. And actually, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say a number one because there's been a few, but I think the hardest thing was first learning to like myself and then learning to love myself, because obviously I had low self-esteem. And so, recognizing that I have a responsibility for my own life. And, I learned to take responsibility for having gotten in those relationships and realizing that I made that choice to stay, and then recognizing that I need to make much better choices in the future. So recognizing how important choices are and how they shape your life.
Yeah. So after that second time, did you actually sit down with yourself like back in 1982 and say, I'm not doing this again?
Yes. I very much so did. At the time I said, the next guy who lays a hand on me, I'm gonna kill him. But of course I, did. But I meant that was my way of telling myself I would never let that happen to me again.
Yeah.
And I never have, because yes, you have to make that commitment, to yourself. I needed to realize that because, like I said, I did, that happened to me twice. And I think one thing that helped me a lot to understand, I wrote a paper in college called Why Men Batter. And I even got into some of the history, why, like, it used to be acceptable for men to, hit their wives. There's something in the Bible about that, like a stick no bigger than your thumb or something. And also just the way, even, the way people react, like if they see a man hitting a woman. Some studies found that they would interfere if two women were fighting and two men were fighting, but they wouldn't interfere if a man was fighting with a woman. So it's really, there's a lot of obviously psychology behind that, because, you know, a lot of times looking on the outside in, women, you know, or other people might think, well, why doesn't she just leave? But it's not that simple at all, you know. And so we need to have, you know, some compassion for these women. And also statistically, it takes some people, they go back like 6 times and they don't leave permanently till the 7th time. I think that's from like organizations that help shelter women who are abused. And I remember seeing that in a movie. I'm like, oh my God, I'm really glad that I just never went back. But I can understand that that happens, especially they're always saying, oh, I'll never do that again, and I love you, and blah, blah, blah. And my advice is, don't believe them.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite sayings is, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them.
Yes, that's such a true saying, you know? Yeah, not what they say. And a funny thing is, I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but when I look back, it was funny. Like I said, he knew where I was working. So he had a dozen red roses sent to me with my favorite candy. And I took the roses and threw them in the garbage. And the people I work with were like, what the heck? But I did eat the candy.
Yes.
But my attitude was, does he think they can make up for everything? Oh my God, you know? Yeah. Anyway, but now, yeah, of course, I look back on, you know, the roses went in a circular file, and I remember everyone looking at me like, I mean, what woman throws away a dozen red roses, right?
Yeah.
This one, you don't want, you don't want anything like that from your abuser, because it doesn't mean anything. Like you said, they've shown you who they are. Yeah. So this little whatever means nothing.
It's just a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just a big game. It's crazy. What are some, you know, I think one of the biggest issues, especially with women who are coming out of, you know, relationships where they don't have boundaries, relationships where they don't know how to say no, is limiting beliefs. You know, we are given a belief system from when we're very young, whether it's with our parents or with society or schooling or whatever it is. And then as we kind of go through our life and through our journey, our beliefs, we start adding, and especially if we end up in relationships that are toxic in any way whatsoever, that adds more limiting beliefs. What are, you know, one or two of the most prominent limiting beliefs that you have really had to work on to get rid of?
Well, I believe that people having difficulty setting boundaries has to do with obviously a lack of self-confidence and a lack of self-worth and self-respect. And so, and I can definitely say one thing is, women are people pleasers. We want people to like us. We are socialized that way. And so we believe that we have this limiting belief that if we don't, you know, say yes or do what the other person wants, that we're not a good person. You know, we have that limiting belief about ourselves that, of course, that we're not good enough. You know, so we're constantly trying to prove ourselves, and just, you know, I think the biggest problem issue. I talk about this in a presentation of mine, is fear. You know, the fear that that person you're saying no to or setting boundaries with isn't going to like you anymore. They don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. If it's a family member, it's even more complicated. And like I said, the biggest boundary I've had to set with my kids, well, not just my youngest one, was because of his issues. My oldest son, I've had a lot of issues with, but and there was a point at which his behavior, I just refused to accept. I was like, I can't make you love me, but you are not gonna disrespect me.
Yeah.
So, and I and he treated me badly and talked badly about me for a long, long time. And I can say that finally in his 40s, we actually have a relationship where we do have conversations sometimes. But I also realize there's a limit to what I can, how far I can get with him. Because when I do talk about some things that he believes happened that didn't happen, he gets really defensive. And I said to myself, you know what? I have to let this go. I can only get so far here. And because of my grandkids, I always tried to have some kind of relationship with him because I didn't want to be cut off from them.
Yes. That's a big issue, is the grandkids.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of times we endure, well, I don't have this issue yet, but I've seen this issue. Grandma and grandpa have to endure some pretty hefty
Why? Yeah, I know.
toxic environments
Yeah.
in order to see the grandkids.
Well, I actually, I literally found out about that grandparents have almost no rights because I ended up taking two of my granddaughters when they were little. They were taken from their mother, and I took them, and I had to fight. It was like I wasn't even given nothing for them. I had to fight for everything I got for them. And it's a lot more common nowadays for grandparents and sometimes siblings, having to take the kids. And so, and you don't, as a grandparent, you really don't have any rights. So, and yeah, it's a big fear. You don't want to be kept from being able to see your grandkids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Shannon is talking about here siblings and how, sometimes you can't have a relationship with your own brother and sister and their kids because of the toxicity that happens within that. So I totally understand that for sure. My daughter doesn't know her cousins, aunts, or uncles. Yeah, they have chosen family now. Totally.
And that is so true, Shannon. We can't choose the people we're related to by blood, but we can make and choose our own family. One of the things I talk about in one of my presentations is about toxic relationships, and and they are very, very difficult. But when you do set a boundary with that, and in your case, Shannon, you decided you had to keep that person entirely out of your life. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you can kind of distance yourself from them. But when it's a family member, that's really, difficult. And I know it's heartbreaking to have to do that. But, it's not good for you to be in a toxic relationship, and definitely not for your kids. I know you don't want that.
Yeah, definitely. What's some advice that you would give to females who are struggling with standing up for themselves and saying the word no to things that don't necessarily serve them?
One thing is you have to believe and acknowledge and accept that you have the absolute right to say no. There's I think it's Shannon Rhimes says, no, no is a complete sentence. The other thing you have to recognize too is you don't need to explain yourself. You don't have to give an excuse or reason. You might want to, but you don't owe it to that person. And of course, this is the most difficult thing. Again, if we haven't been setting boundaries with someone and we suddenly start to, they can react very badly. So of course we're worried or afraid of that. And I don't know anybody who likes confrontation, but and the hardest thing is standing your ground. And let me tell you, I backslide sometimes, you know, but so it's kind of an ongoing process. But when I do backslide, I look at it and I say, why did I do that? You know?
Yeah.
And again, it's that thing wanting, wanting to be liked, wanting to be nice, wanting to be considered nice and altruistic. I won't get into how female entrepreneurs don't charge enough. So, which has to do, with that altruistic thing. So, this is one of the reasons why, I do the coaching, because you don't just suddenly one day go from being a doormat and letting people walk all over you and having no boundaries to the next day you're setting boundaries, everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. It just doesn't, work. I mean, if you could do that, wave a magic wand, great. But that you need help, and you need, you need support, and you need someone to believe in you.
Yeah. I remember when I first started setting boundaries, because I had no idea how to do it. I was just super mean to everybody, like so angry during my boundary setting. You're like yelling it or screaming it or being told that nobody, telling people they don't understand, and just all of this anger, all because I was so uncomfortable doing it, hated confrontation, didn't know how to do it. All of the role models in my life who set boundaries, which were all toxic men, always yelled their boundaries, yelled their rules. So I thought you had to like yell the rules. I thought that was like how you did it. So it took me a long time to figure out how to like lovingly and warmly and considerate with consideration and respect on setting boundaries. And it doesn't have to be this mean, scary thing. It's literally just a sentence. It's just like, a way of being, and just what you expect from others. And it can be said jokingly, or not jokingly, but it can be said with humor. It can be said with love. It can be said quietly. And
absolutely. Yeah, it can, you definitely, I can understand why you felt like you had to respond that way, but and this is how we feel, but you can say it in a nice way. And one thing I recommend, if you have to, are going to confront somebody with this, issue, because sometimes if you need to, you like a friend of mine says, you can always say, I'll get back to you. And and that's up to you. But what I suggest is that you think about what you're going to say. And you can also think about what, that person, you might think about what objections you're going to get. But again, you can be kind, but be firm. I have a longtime friend who says, don't mistake kindness for weakness.
Yep. Definitely. I totally agree with that. So can I, first of all, I want to thank those that are watching live right now and hanging out with us. I so appreciate, Catherine and I both appreciate you being here.
Yes,
Appreciate
absolutely.
the comments, appreciate you listening in. If you are, watching live or on the replay, if you could share this video wherever you're watching us at, so we can get more eyes and ears on our content, we would so appreciate that. We're a platform that's looking to grow, looking to, raise the voices of the women here who do share their stories and have, amazing inputs and amazing content to share with others. But I want to ask, Catherine, for those that are watching live here, for those that have made it this far and are watching on the replay, who do you help? What do you do? Who should be looking to connect with you?
Okay, obviously anyone who has issues, with saying no, or maybe you don't say no as often as you would like to. We're we all can be, guilty of that. We backslide sometimes, but usually it's a lot of times it's a woman who may be married and has kids, and maybe they're an entrepreneur or they're a manager in the corporate world or something, and they're completely, overwhelmed, but they keep saying yes. And of course, setting boundaries in the workplace, I had someone ask me also about a client, is kind of a different animal. You have to really walk a fine line there. But I'm not saying men don't have problems setting boundaries, but the reason I focus on women is I really believe because we have the issues we do because of the way we are socialized. So and so I like to address that, and I understand that why that's an issue. So anybody, that is really struggling with that, who's feeling overwhelmed, and you probably, Sabrina, you probably felt resentful. That was probably part of why you were, shouting. Yeah, you build up a lot of resentment, and then all of a sudden, you find yourself blowing up, and that, I've certainly, done that myself, and so that's why I believe you need to help someone. I love working with women to help them recognize, what the issues are. And you don't always know what your boundaries are. Sometimes you need help with figuring that out, like what's acceptable to you and what is not acceptable.
Exactly. Yeah, it does take time. You're right, to even find out what they are, because you've never
Yeah.
had them before.
Right,
So
right.
you have no idea.
Exactly.
So your website is above your head here. It's also in the description, empoweredtobeyourbest.com. Empoweredtobeyourbest.com. I love that. Where can people find you on social media? Where do you hang out at the most?
I am on Facebook, and you can just, put in Empowered to Be Your Best. I have a personal page, and I do engage on that, just Catharine Hay, but I also have my business page too. So, either way, you can get a hold of me on my personal or my business page, and is the best place. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get used to Instagram. I don't know if it's because I'm an older person or what. But I definitely am on LinkedIn, and of course that's a little more professional, not different than Facebook. But there's a lot of good groups on there and a lot of good ways. I've connected with a lot of great people that way.
Beautiful. And why do you do what you do?
Because I feel so passionate about working with women. I see how we don't get sometimes what we deserve, that we're not treated right. I've definitely found that in corporate world where I was not respected, even if I was in like upper management. And it just, it really bothers me. It bothers me that we have had to fight for what we do have, things that we should have had without question. And I'm just very passionate about that, and really want to try to make a difference in the world, and change that paradigm for women. And I truly believe we need to be more supportive of each other. That's
Definitely.
really, really important.
Yeah, 100. Well, I so appreciate you being here, hanging out with us. This was so fun. I appreciate you opening up and being vulnerable about your past story. And this is the type of stuff. These are the stories that women who are in situations like this right now need to hear. They need to know that there are women out there who were in very similar situations. They made a plan. They were able to escape, and now they are living a life that's beautiful, that's free, that's good, that's light. They're learning how to set boundaries. They're learning how to say no, and they're evolving and they're becoming a new person. So I so appreciate you using your story to really highlight that and highlight where women could be if they just take the time, create a plan, and exit a situation, that there is hope. So, any closing thoughts, Catharine, as we close up?
Well, on that note, I would say to anyone out there who might be in the situation that I was in before, one of the reasons I talk about it openly is because I want women to see that you can get out of it, that is possible. And I don't sugarcoat it. It's not easy, but the way you'll feel once you're out of that, like, it's like being in prison, and that freedom, and it just, and you'll feel so much, better about yourself. And if you have kids, no mom wants their kids to be around that. So you'll feel really good about yourself for doing that. Even if you don't do it for yourself, do it for your kids. That's how I started out. So, yeah.
Definitely.
But remember that there are people who want to help and support you and care about you.
Yeah. I definitely did it for my son too. I wanted to do it before he started becoming a teenager because I knew that there would be like rift, like really bad. And I didn't want him to have to go through that. So I had like a definitive, like I have to get out before he's this age.
Right.
And I'm so glad that I did. So scary, but so glad that I did. So
yeah, and again, I'm sorry. Again, I was just going to say, don't think that you have to not be afraid. It's okay to be afraid because you don't want to be you have to be careful and make that plan. But you are courageous. Women are so much stronger than we know we are, than we believe we are. You can do it.
Absolutely.
And thanks, Sabrina, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you for being here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to sit, relax with me and all of us who are listening. So those of you that are still sitting here listening live, we appreciate you so much. If you are watching us on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay wherever you're watching us so we can send you some love. If you resonated with Catharine and all of the goodness that she shared, make sure you check out her website at empoweredtobeyourbest.com. The link is right above her head area. You can screenshot it, and it should also be in the description below wherever you're watching us at. We love to connect people here in order to make sure that we all continue to rise. This is the Her Version platform. We are a community that's expanding every single day. We're filled with females who are striving to do better than we did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. If you have a story to share, check us out at hernation.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others.